it's my great pleasure to start our second day of our conference, which is about migration, mobility, motion, and literary representations of refugees, exiles, and immigrants. And today with me is the director of Institute for the Humanities in University of Manitoba, professor and acting head Department of History. And his name is Jorge Nállim, and he is very supporting of me and all my initiatives, as well as the Ukrainian general. So Jorge, just
Thank
some
you.
words.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining us for the second day of this conference. I'm very glad that you're here with us, virtually. And well, let's proceed and continue the great conversation we had yesterday.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you. And so our section just now is exile, deportation, and cultural memory. And our first speaker is Nataliia Troinikova, independent researcher, Kassel, Germany. And her topic is rootlessness and sustaining identity with the artistic Ukrainian movement. So please, Nataliia, you're welcome to share your ideas about artistic Ukrainian movement.
Thank you. Yeah, good afternoon once again. Today I would like to discuss the artistic Ukrainian movement as a literary community that confronted the condition of rootlessness after the Second World War and developed strategies for sustaining cultural identity in exile. The central argument is that the artistic Ukrainian movement should be understood not merely as a network of displaced writers, but as a discursive and institutional space where identity was actively maintained and stabilized through literary practices, debates, and publishings. Historical context and research focus was the post-war Ukrainian immigrant community that experienced a rupture of territorial, cultural, and symbolic continuity caused by war and forced migration. I define rootlessness not only as a geographical dislocation, but as a broader existential condition marked by the loss of cultural grounding and institutional continuity. Such a condition does not automatically dissolve identity. Rather, it generates a need to sustain it through symbolic and cultural mechanisms. This presentation, therefore, focuses on how artistic Ukrainian movements, literary and institutional activities worked to preserve and reproduce collective self-understanding under conditions of displacement. My analysis combines post-colonial perspectives which frame émigré writing as a response to imperial and cultural deracination, cultural memory theory which views literature as a medium of continuity and symbolic transmission. Diasporic literary production operates not only by reconstructing identity but by sustaining it, maintaining cultural narratives, aesthetic values, and interpretive frameworks despite spatial rupture. Hannah Arendt describes the mid-20th century as an era marked by mass homelessness and loss of ground. Within this broader European context, artistic Ukrainian movement developed a specifically Ukrainian cultural project, preserving literary subjectivity outside national territory. Artistic Ukrainian movements, congresses, debates, and publishing initiatives created a shared discursive environment that functioned as an infrastructure of continuity. Its key print platforms, collections, almanacs, the journal Arca may be interpreted as sites where identity was sustained through negotiation of cultural memory, aesthetic legitimacy, relations with European literary culture. The movement's rhetoric of great literature expressed not only ambition but responsibility. Literature was seen as a vehicle for maintaining collective cultural presence in exile. At the same time, debates about artistic autonomy revealed tensions between preservation of cultural mission and protection of aesthetic independence. These tensions illustrate that sustaining identity was not a passive process. It involved active negotiation. The diversity of intellectual positions within the artistic Ukrainian movement represents different strategies of sustaining identity. Samchuk emphasized organic national continuity. Sherek conceptualized national style as a structural cultural principle. Kostetsky and Kosach promoted modernist European integration. These positions do not fragment identity. Rather, they demonstrate multiple mechanisms through which symbolic grounding could be maintained. Identity within artistic Ukrainian movement was therefore not static, but dynamic, sustained through discourse, disagreement, and reinterpretation. The journal Arca exemplified these processes particularly clearly. It functions as a platform for intellectual exchange, a mediator between Ukrainian and European modernism, a space for maintaining cultural distinctiveness within broader dialogue. Its orientation towards world literature positioned Ukrainian émigré writing as a participant in modern cultural processes rather than a marginal or isolated one. This aligns with Stuart Hall's concept of diaspora identity as something continually reproduced through transformation. In this sense, sustaining identity didn't mean preserving fixed forms, but enabling adaptive continuity. The importance of artistic Ukrainian movement lies not only in literary output, but in the cultural infrastructure it constructed. Through institutional organization, discursive debate, and publishing practice, the movement developed mechanisms that sustained identity under conditions of rootlessness. Rather than dissolving cultural grounding, displacement promoted the creation of symbolic alternatives, grounded in memory, discourse, and collective literary activity. I therefore propose viewing artistic Ukrainian movement as a key example of how exile communities maintain cultural subjectivity, not by resisting change, but by transforming continuity into an active cultural practice. Thank you for your attention.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this presentation, and we'll have questions later in the end of this session. And
Thank you.
now, do we have Tatiana Starostenko with us? No. Yes. And Людмила Скорина. Okay, so Svitlana Kryvoruchko, professor, Grigory Skovoroda, Kharkiv National Pedagogical University, and her presentation is about the deportation of the Crimean Tatar historical memory. And the film she will discuss is Homeward, 2019 by Nariman Aliev. Okay, so you're welcome. Are you sharing a PowerPoint?
Please allow me to share my presentation. Very nice. Dear colleague, it is a great pleasure to chat with you today. I am deeply grateful to Professor Mariya Shymchyshyn for bringing us together. I would like to draw your attention to the interpretation of the displacement of the Crimean Tatars as genocide. Homeward is not a film about personal loss alone. It is a cinematic reconstruction of a centuries-long system of disposition that targeted the Crimean Tatars as an indigenous people. The 2019 film Homeward, directed by Nariman Aliev and written by Aliev and Marisa Nikitu, premiered on May 22, 2019 in the Uncertain Regard section of the 72nd Cannes International Film Festival. Throughout its narrative conflict, the film explores the historical memory of the Crimean Tatars. All events in this film are structured around ethnic and cultural traditions preserved at the level of individual memory, both conscious and subconscious, within each representative of community. By juxtaposition life and die through the burial ritual, the authors articulate a central idea: the right of the Crimean Tatars to their own language, culture, traditions, literature, and land, rights that have been systematically denied due to discrimination and genocide carried out by the Russian Empire from the 15th to the 21st century. The film, though situation personal, grief within a broader historical and political framework, transformed as an individual journey into a collective narrative of loss and resistance. A key artistic device in the film is the figure of the author mechanic philosopher, who embodied and articulated the historical memory of the Crimean Tatars. Through this character, the film reflected on historical facts that remain largely unknown to the general public and, in many cases, even to intellectual elites. The introduction of this character fulfills a didactic functions, educational and popularizing in nature, aimed at making previously closed or silenced historical knowledge publicly accessible. Speaking in allusion often with an ironic of seemingly humorous tone characteristic of postmodern narrative strategies, the mechanic addresses profoundly serious issues, most notably the discrimination against the Crimean Tatars by Russians over the past 585 years. Historically, for 342 years, from 1441 to 1743, Russia warred constitution, military and political conflict against the Crimean Khanate. This existed on the territory of present-day Crimea. The majority of the Khanate's population were Muslims. Russian imperial expansions into Crimea was formally recorded in 1743, after which the situation intensified significantly in the 18th century, when Russian authorities began to resettle Russian peasants and notably in Crimea. The most destructive factor for Crimea's charter cultural was remained the violent imposition of the Russian language and the prohibition of the use of the native Crimean Tatar language. This practice falls within the framework of ethno-linguistic nationalism, aimed at othering indigenous linguistic and cultural identity. Thus, the affection of Crimean Tatars from Crimea was actively initiated by the Russian authorities as early as 18th century. In the film Homeward, a philosopher auto-mechanic speaks about first deportation of the Crimean Tatars carried out by Suvorov in 1778, 18th century. The justification for this deportation was construction of an ideology according to which Crimean Tatars, as Muslims, already oppressed Christians. The absurdity in the ideology lay in the fact that, in addition to Crimean Tatars, the Russian government also deported Greek and Armenians, who were Christians. Thus, for many centuries, Russian authorities have disseminated among the masses information framed by a specific rhetoric that was false. In reality, through such actions, the Russian government thought to destroy the economy of the Crimean Kyiv. The Crimean Tatars attempted to resist Russian expansions. They formed an ethno-confessional community, a diaspora, in order to preserve their cultural and religious traditions and to maintain this Muslim in Turkey. The activities of the Tatar community were interpreted by the Russian authorities as a potential threat. As a result, Crimean Tatars were subjected to repression. In the 20th century, the Soviet imperial government under Stalin continued to implement the policy initiated in the Russian Empire in the 18th century and actively pursued in the 19th century. The deportation of the Crimean Tatars took place on May 18, 1944 Kyiv. The Crimean Tatars people, as an entire ethnic group, were accused of collaboration and cooperation with Nazi Germany during World War II. In fact, this represented a colonial attitude toward minorities, fear of an ethnic group living near state borders. They were feared and distracted. In effect, the Russians took away the Crimean Tatars' way of life, while in Crimea they had been embedded in viticultural, tobacco cultivation, and fruit growing. In the new territories, they were forced to work in lodging and in mines. Thus, this constituted a mental crisis of an entire ethnic group and the deprivation of freedom from ordinary people, biological beings deprived of the right to choose their own or natural way of life. In the sense of Grigory Skovoroda himself of Sroidnost, concept Sroidnost. Perhaps this is why Skovoroda himself fled from St. Petersburg when he set upward a brilliant career in the Russian imperial court. In this way, Crimean Tatars formed for their children a dream of a homeland that had been taken away and that needed to be regained. In this precisely this idea that the father reflects upon the film when he asks Aline to return to Crimea. This dream carried the scent of the sea, spoken of by Aline and the girl. The taste of grubs, figs, and fishes, and memories of chips and montans. Owing to this mentality, the Crimean Tartar movements of the 1950-1980 emerged, defending the ethnic right of return to Crimea to have native homeland. The Crimean Tatar language played the most important role in preserving the historical memory and identity of the Crimean Tatars, in remaining authentic. Belaruses and Ukrainians suffered a small from Russification. Even after the collapse of the USSR, when its independent state has already been formed. In 2014, the illegal occupation of Crimea took place, which is addressed in the film Homeward. After this occupation, Russian authorities once again began to implement policies of genocide against the Crimean Tatars. Under Ukrainian governance, school this Crimean Tatar as the language of introduction had been established in Crimea. Crimean Tatar's language and literature were introduced as subject, and at Vernadsky Taurida National University in Simferopol, an educational program was opened to train specialists of Crimean Tatars language and literature. After the illegal annexation of Crimea by Russia in 2014, university specialists in Crimean Tatar philology became subject to operations by the authorities. School this Crimean Tatar as the language of instruction began to close. In 2017-2018, only 7 out of 16 such schools remained. University curricula also removed well-known foreign writers from France, Germany, the United States, and other European countries whose humanistic values, reflected in their works, did not align ideologically with the Russian regime currently operating illegally on Crimea. Crimean Tatars became political prisoners and were imprisoned. In 2018, there were 116 Crimean Tatars political prisoners out of 118 political prisoners in Russia. After 2014, Russian authorities banned the activities of the Kuriltai and Medlisu. Contemporary Russian authorities continue to implement policies developed during the Russian and Soviet empire. Imperial mentality has not remained in the past, but continues to exist in the collective conscience and subconscious of Russians. Ukrainians have constantly supported the aspirations of the Crimean Tatar for ethnic identity and the preservation of national culture, traditions, and language. These issues were discussed within the Helsinki movement. Does the terminology of history and sociology include the concept of genocide of the Crimean Tatars? Why? has this term still not been clearly formulated and within legal and scholarly discourse. The most destructive factor for Crimean Tatar culture was and remains and forces imposition of the Russian language and the prohibition of communication in the native Crimean Tatars language. These actions within the concept of ethno-linguistic nationalism. By embedding historical trauma in everyday dialogue and ritual, the film exposes how imperial violence survives not only in archives, but in silenced memory. The isolated status of Crimean Tatars as therefore not a historical episode, but an on Dijon colonial conditions. Dear colleagues, thank you very much for your attention. I would be pleased to answer your question if you have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. And let me check first. Of course, we have questions, but let me check first whether other people have joined us, maybe the last minute. So, Tetiana Starostenko, Людмила Скорина. Okay, no. Okay, so we have just only two presenters, and we can ask them questions or just express our thoughts or ideas about their presentations. So, who would like to?
I have a question.
Okay, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Nataliia and Svitlana, for your presentations. Really appreciate it. Svitlana, I have a question for you regarding the the film that you were analyzing, because it was released in 2019, right? 5 years after the annexation of Crimea and so on. How was it? How was the film received? What was the reaction? In Ukraine or outside Ukraine?
Thank you for your question. We have the reaction as resistant for this film Homeward only this intellectual. Only this intellectual, only these writers, authors, maybe professor university, and we have not reaction people mass.
Interesting.
And the problem is silence.
Okay, well.
But this film have a world reaction. This film was demonstrated in Cannes Festival. And we have a reaction. But we have not article. I wrote article about this film, but now we have only a reaction in mass press, mass journal, not scientific not a scientific journal.
Right. No, I was wondering because since the issue of Tatar identity is so strong with all this history of persecution, exile, from the 18th century on, right? So I was wondering about any reaction that might have come from the Tatar diaspora or the Tatar population within Crimea. So that was my question, right? But it's interesting that the reaction came mostly for what you said within intellectual circles, right? Writers, filmmakers, and so on, but that there was not a wider reception or discussion of the film, all things considered.
Very important is speaking about this. We will begin.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your question.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm also wondering about this idea of diaspora. Yes, Tatar diaspora like throughout the world. And did they manage to preserve the language, culture, and do you feel the same like repetitive structures that we have in all diasporas? Yes, this longing for home, yes, and the impossibility to return at the same time. Is that like in their writings, novels, maybe? And even in the movie itself, is there this split, what we have identity, yes, between longing and impossibility to achieve the home that they were forced to leave?
Дуже very important question, пані Марія. Можна я спробую відповісти? Просто дуже складне питання. Якщо ви зможете спробувати перекласти на от я просто боюсь чогось не сказати. Спасибі. Дуже велика проблема. Вони намагаються зберігати оцю історичну пам'ять в екзилі. Тобто вони внутрішньо її зберігають. Вони її зберігають за допомогою релігії, за допомогою молитви, кожний у себе вдома. Можете перекласти, будь ласка, це?
So they preserve this their identity mostly through religious practices. Yeah, so they are praying at home individually, like so trying to preserve identity through religious.
Є окремі представники, які намагаються зберігати зовні цю пам'ять. Вони носять сьогодні, в 21 столітті, національний одяг кожного дня.
But some of them are trying to preserve, like, and demonstrate it, like in public. Yes, they are wearing national clothes, and so like they are.
Я хочу навести дуже дивний випадок. Я зараз маю студентку зараз в 24-25 роках, яка живе на території Криму, учиться в нашому університеті. І на всі дистанційні заняття вона підключається в своєму цьому одязі. Тобто вона навіть вдома, коли сама, коли її ніхто не бачить, намагається це берегти.
Just now she has a student, and the student is from Crimea, and every time she joins this online meeting or online class, she is wearing national clothes.
Але вони, татари, які зараз живуть на території Крима, цей фільм не бачили. Вони його не бачили. Тому що
just what is interesting, that Tatars who are living in Crimea just now, they haven't seen this movie. Чому вони не мають доступу, чи як?
Ну, по-перше, я думаю, що це небезпечно для життя дивитися такі фільми.
So for them it's existential like threats, so they can be prosecuted for watching this movie. So it's
Тому
not
що
like
за ними стежать, за всіми за ними стежать. І чекають, щоб вони поїхали звідти, щоб зайняти їхні будинки.
So they are constantly watched, and yes, so like the Russians, as she says, they are waiting for them to leave. And so they want to take their homes.
It's very interesting what you're describing. Sorry.
They have not freedom. They have not freedom. Absolutely have not freedom.
It's interesting what you're describing in terms of the paper, one of the papers, the last papers yesterday, which was about the Caribbean, right? The Caribbean, and we discussed a little bit about this idea, what Mariya was mentioning right now, is this tension between people who go in exile and they desire to come back, but there's an impossibility, right? So there's this tension. You're in a foreign land, desiring for your old homeland. So you are not in either place. You are somewhere in between, right? And that was clear. He was talking about specifically Jamaica, but we were discussing the broader Caribbean, and probably Dr. Ramirez will talk about that with Pedro Pan project in Cuba. So the island nations of the Caribbean were being an island, and the idea of moving out, migration, forced or economic, right, for Puerto Ricans, the Dominicans, Cubans, Haitians, all these people who are in this transient world, of exile, and how that is captured by in film, in literature. This tension is very clear in Cuban filmmaking. That's a constant theme, in post-revolutionary cinema, more contemporary. So I found very interesting the comparison that you are suggesting in this case with the Crimean Tatars and the tension between, well, under local oppression on the one hand, but also people who are resilient. They still want to keep their religious practices. They want to still dress, as a form of preservation, right? And cultural and linguistic preservation.
This is very important and a deep process. Maybe we have possibility will publish the article about this problem, these issues in your institute, and then we will demonstrate the problem and maybe. What do you think about this?
We are not ready to answer immediately.
We're not ready for that yet, but yeah, that would be something to consider. Yeah, thank you.
Do you know how many people were, or how many people actually left Crimea? Crimean Tatars, how many of them left their places after Russia's invasion?
Different places, maybe in Europe.
How many? How many?
Number.
Okay.
I have not this information.
Okay. So good. Thank you, Svitlana, and we wish you good luck with your further research of this topic. And Nataliia, about the artistic Ukrainian movement. So I'm not sure whether this is actually the focus of your broader research, or it is just the research that is very appealing to you just now because of the situation we have in our country. Because from my observations, I see that now very many Ukrainian scholars have become interested in this DP camps, and exile movement after the Second War, because maybe it's we can relate to this emotionally, more like it's something that reminds our situation in exile, and so I'm just wondering whether this is your broader project or the project that was provoked by this situation in Ukraine that we are all suffering from.
Thank you for the question. That's a really relevant one for me. I understand your point, and I understand why you could jump at this kind of conclusion, but so I would say it both coincides or combines two interests of mine. I had the deep interest even earlier in the emigre literature, and my my PhD's focus was also emigre literature, but it was a Russian one. So that's kind of, I would say, a logical continuation of my research before that, because that was also related to the topic of exile closely, because of the circles were the same, basically writers, and at the moment I focus on the same on the same area, but of course now I have a different situation, including the personal one, not only a scientific one. So on the one hand, of course, I would like to preserve or promote or draw more attention to the Ukrainian emigre literature and physically I'm located in Germany, so theoretically I can have an access to the archives. On the other hand, or another point to mention, this is, I think, really important to demonstrate the potential of such research and to make them relevant and, so to say, popular. Yeah, so it was not that much of an interest or kind of researched, well-researched topic before, but this is a huge area that can complement to the cultural identity and generally to the way how we can reconstruct in the future our self-identification, cultural identity, etc. So I would like to continue researching this topic, but it is of course limited a little bit because the artistic Ukrainian movement existed mainly within 1945 to 1948, and it is limited to, of course, the collections that had been published, and they are kind of being researched at the moment, though they were researched before. So there is kind of limit. I hope I answered your question. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. And it's also interesting about like how actually at that period they saw the ways to preserve and develop maybe national identity. Yes, so like you outlined that some of them were very nationalistic, yes, and they argued for this national basis, yes, for this identity, like to preserve it, while others were more open, yes, not so rigid in their understanding of Ukrainian identity, yes, and were more open to embrace movements that were actually happening in Europe at that period. And it's but maybe you it's not your deeper research yet, but as for me, it was interesting, especially those who later from DP camps, yes, they went to, let's say, the US or Canada, and they created this kind of very closed cultural space. Yes, like we can argue about New York group, yes, and they continued to write in Ukrainian, yeah, and they were unknown to American, let's say, readers, yeah, and the same in Canada, yes. So they were very focused, yes, on preserving language, yes, and cultural identity. But do you think that it was good and bad at the same time? Yes, so it was good because they preserved it, yes, so like language, culture, but at the same time they didn't have access to broader audience, and so they could not advocate this like on a broader scale, and were not visible for the hosting cultures.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say that I view this phenomenon of the artistic Ukrainian movement a little bit broader than just preservation of the culture, because their attempt, to my mind, was to create an infrastructure. For this reason, they implemented debates and the publishings, and they had discussions, and exactly what you said. So they had this inner debates with opposing views, which gave some impulse, of course, to the development and thriving in the future. Because only when we have ideas, debates, and opposition in views, in opinions, then it's a fruitful ground for developing something new. So preservation is good, but I believe that was a next step. It was a given a new thought. So looking at this phenomenon from a different angle, and I strongly believe that they wanted to promote this idea in the future, and to create the kind of circle community where they will be able, or to which they will be able to attract some, for example, funds. And I do agree with your point that goals, the initial goals, they were to broaden their context. They were attempting to enter this European cultural space, which was, to my mind, a very logical step, and that would give a lot of general that will bring new ideas, new, let's say, spirit, movement, attract interest from the outside, because just existing inside your own bulb doesn't bring a lot of results, or doesn't show the perspective for the future. And I do believe that as this attempt hasn't been successful fully, so they needed more support, or more, let's say, financing or whatever. That's why this, unfortunately, this subjectivities, this community, so to say, stopped existing. But the prospects were like really big.
Yeah. Have a question, comment, Nataliia. If I understand correctly, you're focusing the years 1945-48, right? The immediate post-war, which is in itself quite significant, because we are talking about immediately after the end of the brutal war, where Ukraine was devastated. First, of course, the legacy of the 1930s and the famine and the mass death there, Nazi invasion, Soviet retaliation. So in this particular context, 1945, for the immediate post-war, with that devastation, with also the imposition of the Soviet Union over Ukrainian national identity, this group is trying to create, this artistic group is trying to create. So the circumstances are extraordinary, and we have seen in many cases, I'm picking up on Mariya's comment, here in Winnipeg, for example, many groups from Eastern Europe arrived here in the middle post-war. Not only Ukrainians had longer roots here in Manitoba, but Polish, for example. A lot of Polish people moved here, coming out of the experience of war, and they created their institutions. They tried to recreate, that kind of sense of community, right? And I have seen it with Latin American communities in exile in the 1970s. The Chilean community, escaping the dictatorship in Chile, they came here, and for example, they created music groups, and they have kind of leaflets, kind of things. So they try to create a culture here in Winnipeg, which was impossible at that time there in Chile. So I found really interesting the period of time you're looking at. It's a moment of intense reaccommodation, right, and negotiations within Ukraine, with the European space on the one hand, but with the Soviet Union on the other hand. So I found really interesting that context.
Thank you.
Okay, so as we don't have our two speakers with us, so I would suggest to have a break.
Yeah, we'll have a break, and we'll resume at 10:30 our time. So our time here in Canada right now is 9:52. So 10:30 we'll be back here for the next session. We'll move from there. So from now we'll put everything on hold, and we'll start the session a few minutes before 10:30.
Yeah, and we hope that our colleagues from Ukraine will join us, but because of the blackouts that we are now suffering in Ukraine, so I'm not sure, but let's hope that they will join us. If not, then we will rearrange our meeting.
Yeah.
Nataliia?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you wholeheartedly for this opportunity to take part in this conference and for your feedback and for your thoughtful comments. I appreciate it very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being with us, and I hope you will join us for the next sessions.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you for
welcome.
fruitful dialogue.
Okay, thank
Stay
you.
tuned then until 10:30, and then remember we have 11:30 their session, and then we have at 12:30 the keynote speaker closing the conference. Thank you very much. See you soon.
Thank you.